seems to me too clear, disturbingly clear, that racism is more deeply embedded in the American psyche, the American social system, than we had believed.
Francis Sumner was a leader in education reform. He's often referred to as the father of black psychology. Never receiving a formal post-primary education, he was required to take an examination to see if he was suitable for Lincoln College, which is now Lincoln University, the first institution for African Americans in the U.S. He passed the test in 1911 at the age of 15, graduating valedictorian from Lincoln College magna cum laude in philosophy. In 1916, he attended Clark University, where he received his second bachelor's degree in English. He returned to Lincoln as a graduate student and teacher of religious study, psychology, philosophy, and German. He advanced his study in psychology, focusing on the understanding of elimination of racial bias in the administration of justice. In 1917, he returned to Clark University, where he was awarded a senior scholarship. G. Stanley Hall, Sumner's mentor, approved his application for a PhD in psychology. After his doctoral dissertation entitled Psychoanalysis of Freud and Adler was accepted, he received his doctorate degree from Clark University on June 14, 1920, making him the first African American to receive a PhD in psychology. Dr. Inez Prosser was a teacher and school administrator, born in Yoakum, Texas in 1897. Prosser graduated as valedictorian from Yoakum Colored High School in 1912 and received a degree in teacher training from Prairie View Normal College, which is now Prairie View A&M University, where she was also valedictorian. After returning to Yoakum, she became an assistant principal at Clayton Industrial School and Anderson High School. She went on to receive her master's degree in educational psychology from the University of Colorado. After she received her master's degree, she became a member at the Tilston College, a black college where she dedicated herself to the educational and psychological development of black students. While at Tilston, she organized a series of lectures from 1929 to 1930, featuring a lecture by George Washington Carver. As a principal of Tagaloo High School, she was awarded aid from the General Education Board, established by John D. Rockefeller in 1902. She received $1,000 to apply towards another year graduate studies, and she became the first black woman to earn a PhD in psychology, graduating from the University of Cincinnati in 1933. Kenneth and Mamie Clark, a married couple and psychologist who involved much of their research among black children, investigating the children's attitudes towards race and their racial identity affected by segregation. Mamie Clark enrolled at Howard in 1934, where she would eventually meet her future husband, Kenneth Clark, who was a master's degree student in psychology. During his years at Howard University, he worked under the influence of mentor Francis Sumner. Mr. Clark was later directed by Dr. Sumner to attend Columbia University to work with another influential mentor, Otto Kleinberry. While studying psychology for his doctorate at Columbia University, he did research in support of the study of race relations by Swedish economist Gunnar Myrdal, who wrote An American Dilemma. In 1940, Clark was the first African American to earn a PhD in psychology from Columbia University. At the same time, in 1938, Mamie Clark would graduate magna cum laude from Howard University. After witnessing the work of William Hastie, Thurgood Marshall was in preparation for the 1954 landmark decision of Brown versus Board of Education. It influenced her master's degree, the development of consciousness of self in Negro preschool children. Later, she would become the first African-American woman to earn her PhD in experimental psychology in 1943 from Columbia University. But what they're most famous for is the Mamie Clark's doll study she did for her thesis. It was inspired by Ruth and Jean Harrowit's work on self-identification in nursery school children. Her thesis would spur her husband's interest on the subject. The study used 4 dolls in all ways except for color. It was shown to children ages 3 to 7, asking about racial perception and preference. The experiment played a key role as evidence in the court challenge that led to the Supreme Court Brown versus Board of Education decision, proving segregation caused psychological harm to children. Ruth Howard was most notable for her psychological work concerning students with special needs at Children's Providence Hospital School. One of the early pioneers to earn her PhD in psychology, she was also an active member of the American Psychological Association, the International Council of Women Psychologists, the American Association of the University of Women, the National Association of Colored Women, and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. After graduating from Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C., she attended Simmons College in Boston, Massachusetts, where she received her bachelor's degree in 1921. Then she moved to Cleveland, Ohio. She then received her master's degree in 1927. She attended the Teachers College and School of Social Work at Columbia University from 1929 to 1930, and studied child psychology at the Child Development Institute at the University of Minnesota from 1930 to 1934. She received her PhD in psychology and child development from the University of Minnesota. After receiving her doctorate, she began her own clinical psychology-based private practice. Wade Nobles is a professor emeritus in the Department of Africana Studies at San Francisco State University and a pioneer of the African American psychology movement. He was a founding member of the Association of Black Psychologists. The movement focused on improving the state of black mental health, and it publishes the Journal of Black Psychology, an organization he served as president from 1994 to 1995. He authored over 100 articles, research reports, chapters of books, including the following. Amos Wilson was a theoretical psychologist with a Pan-African mindset. With an undergraduate degree at Morehouse University, a master's degree at the New School of Social Research, he attained his PhD degree from Fordham University. He worked as a psychologist, social caseworker, supervising probation officers, and training administrator in the New York City Department of Juvenile Justice. Dr. Wilson believed that racism was a structurally and institutionally driven phenomenon derived from the inequities of power relations between groups, and could persist even if and when more overt expressions or if were no longer present. He was influenced by Marcus Garvey and has written many books on the subject matter. Naim Akbar is a clinical psychologist with an Afrocentric mindset. He is a scholar, public speaker, and author. After high school, he attended the University of Michigan, where he completed his bachelor's in psychology, master's in clinical psychology, and PhD in clinical psychology. While working towards his PhD in clinical psychology, Akbar wrote a dissertation called Power Themes Among Negro and White Paranoid and Non-Paranoid Schizophrenics. After attaining his PhD from the University of Michigan, he worked in the psychology department of Morehouse College. In 1971, he joined the Association of Black Psychologists and served both on the editorial board and was the association editor for the Journal of Black Studies for 8 years. In 1991, he wrote a paper entitled Mental Disorder Among African Americans. In this paper, he identifies the mental illness in 4 categories. ASA Hilliard was a professor of educational psychology who worked on early African history, specifically ancient Kemet, its culture, education, and society. As a professor at Georgia State, he had joint appointments in the Department of Education Policy Studies and the Department of Educational Psychology and Special Education. He was also a dean of the School of Education at San Francisco State University. In 1981, he introduced baseline essays, short stories about geocultural groups within a particular area. They are a series of educational materials commissioned in 1987 by the Portland, Oregon Public School District. Compiled by ASA Hilliard, it was intended to provide information about the history, culture, and attributions of Africans and African Americans in the disciplines of art, language arts, mathematics, science, social studies, and music. It was to be used by teachers in other districts. ASA Hilliard published several books, such as